Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's talk. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Paul. I'm one of the artists from Something and Son, and we're here to talk with some fantastic people, Benjamin Perrot and Cyndi Anafo, and also Ursula from the project. And we're here to talk about collaboration and how we as creative people can work with communities and bring ideas to life, the challenges of that, and also I guess hopefully share with you guys how we tend to do it, things we've learned along the way, mistakes we've made, and I guess most importantly, I hope shed an optimistic light on how creativity can be a tool for supporting and helping communities. And the way the format's going to run today is we're going to rattle through some images. We're all visual people who like to bring our work to life through physical things, and so we're going to talk you through a few of our projects, and then we'll descend into hopefully a constructive conversation. There'll be plenty of time for questions, and we're really excited about sharing ideas with you, and kicking off I think the third session that has taken place in these spring talks. Now, I must make an apology that my colleague Andy Merritt can't join us today, but you know, Andy and I have worked together for 12 years, so I'm very happy to step into his shoes today. We will be kicking things off with Ben talking us through his work, and I look forward to the questions coming through and a really interesting session today. So thanks everyone. Please introduce yourselves when you start your talks.
Hello everyone. So my name is Benjamin Perrot. I'm really pleased to be with you tonight. I'm talking from Tunisia, North Africa, and I'll be presenting a bit the work I'm doing, the collaboration, and the kind of cultural, artistic practice I've been developing over the years. But especially, I'm going to focus on a project called El Warsha, which I started in 2016. I'm going to try to be quite short because we want to have time to have a proper discussion afterwards. So El Warsha is a workshop. It's a space that started in 2016 in Tunisia, Tunis, or North Africa. And the idea initially was to have a space where people can come together, bring use tools, materials, and create something for the neighborhood. There was no real idea of who would gonna come to that space. I'd been in Tunisia for over a year when I started, and I really wanted to experiment. And I was quite surprised because the people who came and joined were initially young people, especially children. There was quite a lot of them, and we started making things like different furniture elements. And the project started as a 3-month residency and turned out to last for over five years, at least up to now. We've been doing different projects in public space intervention, community art projects, product design. Things have changed, evolved over time, but overall, it's always been about bringing people together, finding a way to kind of create a community around that space, around the workshop, and around the different kind of projects we've been doing. So the workshop has evolved, and the community has spread out over the years. So we now have people doing projects in Nefta, south of Tunisia, in London. We started in actually 2018 or 2019, in Lisbon and Davis, California. So we're not really a brand, and it's not a Starbucks coffee we're opening everywhere. It's just it's just people from the team who've moved out or moved back to their own country, and who started basically working with same spirit. So I wanted to show a few projects just to give you a kind of a broad idea of what we're doing. The workshop in Tunis is interesting because we're kind of really embedded in the community, and people have been asking us to design and build a lot of things over the years. We built cradles, coffins, tables, chairs, and one of our neighbor is a shoemaker. He's got a workshop right across the street, and came to us one day and was like, "Oh, I really want to build a boat. I want to." So we were a bit surprised, and but the guy found the technical drawing on the internet and brought it to us. We started looking at it, and over like a period of like 6 months, we've been building that boat. It's been really a kind of shared experience. So he's coming with his family, his brother, his nephew, and there's a few of us in the workshop working on it. And the boat is out on the street. It's a long boat. I mean, it's 6 meters long. It takes a lot of space, and this has been kind of bringing people together. In London, I wanted to share a few experiences in different locations and show also the diversity of people we've been working with. In London, we've been working with elderly people in Tottenham, in 2 shelter homes. It's been, as you can imagine, over the last year, it's been quite tough. It's been quite challenging because of the situation, the COVID, not being able to show and to be in the space physically. So we had to invent other ways of working together. But it's been really fulfilling and meaningful working in this environment. I mean, sadly, a few of the members that we've worked with have passed away in the last 2 years. But to know that we've been there every week, creating those connections over quite a long period of time, and to know that we've been part of this, creating those relationships, even for them, some of them at the end of their life, has been quite an important part of our work. And a lot of the discussion we have around the workshop, like most of the time, have nothing to do with what we make, but really relate to kind of the people who are there. And I mean, Tottenham, as some of you know, is a really diverse community. So we have people from all over the place who've lived in Tottenham and are part of this community. This is another. I'm going quite quickly. I'm trying to be brief. Sorry. This is another project in Ghana. We went in 2018. We were invited by a festival, the Chalewote Street Art Festival. And we flew with 5 young people from Tunis who'd never traveled before. So that was a really exciting experience. Most of Tunisians want to go up north. They want to travel across to Europe, but actually going south and looking at what's like around. I mean, it's quite far away from Tunis, but still it's part of Africa. It was really exciting to have this experience together. We reclaimed some bamboo. They use it in Accra for on construction sites for scaffolding. So we went around construction sites and we gathered some of that material, and we created this kind of space, community space, like not community space, shared space for the time of festival. So there was quite a short time. So we stayed there for only like 2 weeks. So it's a lot shorter than usually the type of project we're doing. But it was exciting because over like the 3 days of the festival, nearly 20,000 people used that space, and it kind of stayed. It didn't break down or anything, and we were quite pleased because of the material and the rope and everything we've been using, which was not necessarily not so steady at the beginning, and we managed to do something that lasted for that time. And so creating spaces is something also that we're really keen on doing. And so this is back in Tunis. There's this tradition in Tunisia where people gather and bring things they find to create seats, and it's called Gada. And it's so this one is in a gallery space, and we've been gathering rubbles and things on the street to create that structure. But there's really this idea that you have to make your own space, basically. And there's a bit of a transgression, a transgressive element to that. A lot of the time, people associate Gada with drinking. In Tunisia, drinking is not necessarily well perceived, even though a lot of people drink. I mean, and public space is a space where people need to express themselves. So the Gada is really this idea that you make the space to kind of gather around, and we thought that was interesting because also it's made from the rubbles of the city. A lot of the time you see on the side of the street all those kind of stones and elements that have been left behind, and it's interesting to think that people are using that to congregate and to come together. So yeah, those are some of the projects I wanted to show, just to give you a rough kind of broad idea of the things we've been doing. And I hope that can feed also into the conversation we're going to have later on, more specifically on certain of issues or things we've been talking about.
Benjamin, thank you. That was brilliant. Really, really interesting work, and I think there'll be lots of synergies with the things that follow. I'm now going to give an introduction to some of Something the Sun's work. Obviously, we're commissioned to produce the fossil artwork, and then my colleague Cyndi will kind of pick up for the next phase of the talk after that. So I'm just going to share my screen, and thank you very much, Ben. One second. Hi, so I was going to talk through Something the Sun, and I suppose our process around how we bring communities and together using artistic thought processes and ways of working. Again, I'll rattle through things like Benjamin did. So the kind of first project I want to introduce to is a project called Barking Bathhouse. Now, this was one of our early projects in 2012. And essentially, we had researched the kind of history of Barking and Dagenham, and come across there was once a bathhouse, a place where people bathed together in the centre of the community, and it provided an alternative to the pubs, so another place to both wash and to hang out. And so we kind of started with that simple concept of let's bring it back. Let's see if we can recreate some of the energy, the collaborations, and the kind of mixing of people that comes about through different types of social space. Many of those sorts of spaces, I think, have been lost from our cities over the years. And so we were commissioned essentially to create a temporary sculpture. That was the commission, but instead of a sculpture, we built a living, working bathhouse, and had sauna, an ice room. We had tiles on the tiles of ice on the walls. We created an outdoor relaxation area that when it rained on you, it would rain and it smelled and it got loads of mosquitoes in it. It was quite a weird and wonderful place. And then we did what we often do in projects. We reached out into the community around and said, who'd like to work at a spa? We provided micro grants for individual technicians. So, massage technician, have £200 to buy your stuff and get started. Went out to the local beauty colleges and just put adverts in the paper to come and be part of this spa, and that led to an incredible team of people. In the end, we had seven local people working in the spa, kind of paid over the period of the 4 months that it ran. When we work, we always have an eye on, I suppose, using public art budgets to try and create legacy, and I think there's a kind of there's a theme of sort of object-based art that doesn't leave anything beyond an object. And certainly what I'm interested in is how you use those opportunities to create a legacy and bring people together. This was part of the Olympics, and whilst it initially was commissioned to only be open for 4 weeks, this site in this location, it stayed open for 4 months. And then the team that we brought together, with some of whom you can see here, they then continued the bathhouse for another 7 years in the local library. So the pop-up was built, it was then disassembled, and a leisure centre was built on the site. But the team then relocated into the local library, and that was the first spa in a library in the UK. And then they ran that as a social enterprise for 7 years. And they're still running it. They changed the name this year, but they're still running a kind of a local community-run spa in Barking and Dagenham. And many of the people who we introduced through this really weird project that felt weird for everyone are now kind of, working together, good friends. And so that's, without that initial idea, I suppose, and without that leap into the dark of kind of, this is something we've got a hunch might be a fun and cool thing to do, the legacy wouldn't have followed from that. And I think that's where we sort of see the arts and as a re-enabling thing, because we weren't asked for the business plan. We weren't asked for the things that kind of proved this would definitely work. We were just given the trust to create something which had come through a body of work that we produced before. It was lots of people locally came down, but also we had the bizarre situation of getting a local an actual spa review in the Telegraph, even though it was a kind of art project, and they didn't like the fact people were able to bathe on gravel, and that it was all a little bit rough around the edges. But it created some incredible moments of times I was there, and the group of people and the conversations that took place, and the naughtiness that went on as well was just bizarre and fun and playful in this sort of weird environment that we'd created. Another project, which is, again, there's permanence, and there's some also things which are more temporary. This was a project that Take Britain, which delivered about two years ago, and essentially we were asked to create a social space on the front lawn, which had never been done before. It always sat there as a piece of grass, and they wanted to bring it to life. And so we essentially, as much of our work is about, is we created a sort of stage for people then to occupy. This was based around sort of dismantling loneliness and bringing the local community together. So we had sort of circular tables, we had stools which are tied together, so you have to sit next to someone, you can't take it off on your own. We also had sculptures which only went on. They basically were fountains that only produced water out of them when people had proper conversations. So we got an AI expert to kind of design it so it listened to deep conversations rather than flippant and shallow ones. And it wasn't based on how loud you spoke. It was based on the kind of depth and the rhythm of a proper conversation. And then the water would get started. And, as I think is kind of, we feel works in creating genuinely collaborative spaces, our next step is just to open it up and just say, come down, use it, here's a stage. And so we very much kind of reached out to lots of organizations around London and said, hey guys, we've got a chance to do something at the Tate. Do you want to come and do it here? And inevitably, as a space which has always been quite excluding people and is also strongly associated with the British Empire and the that I guess that it's a colonial institution in some ways. So actually opening up, many people, including staff there, were kind of excited by the fact it was actually the reins, the control was taken away, which often those institutions are quite good at providing. And essentially people were allowed to kind of come in and occupy in a far more relaxed way. And it was us as artists who were able to kind of unlock that space for other people. And we also worked during this time with an organisation called the Open ITFA to work with the Muslim community to celebrate a religious event which brought people together to eat together in a space. It was quite touching, like the security guard was like, whoa, people, my mates don't usually get to come down to this sort of place, so thanks, that was good fun. And this kind of reaching out is very purposeful. So one of the dinners. This is a kimchi making workshop. We worked with the LGBTQ community in London as well to kind of come together and use the space for various events they were interested in running. And this was a dinner where we went to both wealthy parts of town and to areas with higher levels of deprivation, and we invited people for dinner. So we had two invites, and they went through each door, and people just came down and had a conversation who otherwise wouldn't ever get to kind of hang out and mix. I think obviously our cities are designed to keep us all apart, and so sometimes it's nice to force that as a way to come together. You'll see that food was also a big theme, and a lot of our work does use food as a tool to bring people together and encourage conversations. And then to the really kind of playful and the small, the more intimate ways that we bring people together. This was in the festival in Kinsale, I think in 2015, where we were tasked with creating a temporary public sculpture for an exhibition. And we learnt about the tradition of Irish sweat lodges, where after a hard day in the fields, people would dig a hole in a cliff and light a fire in it and sweat themselves clean. And we're also kind of struck just by the beauty of the sea here, but no one went in the sea because it was too cold. So we built a sweat lodge next to it, which looks like it's made from stone, but it's actually was scanned by a drone, and then it was a scan of an old church in Ireland, which we then printed and made into a paper structure, which from a distance looks like stone. As you get close to it, you realise it's just a bunch of timber and wood. And then people could book it and use it and have kind of conversations. So various people from around the town, it was just being in constant use. People would go in and sweat and talk, which again was quite fun, and it's fun to go in ourselves. And some kids came in with tracksuits because they weren't used to saunas and they got very hot. So I guess a lot of our work is creating these spaces, and then hopefully leaving some tradition or some legacy afterwards. Now I'm going to hand over to Cyndi, because one of the projects, I want to kind of also express that I think we're all showing in our presentations that the depth of work and the time it can take to build trust and to create genuinely long-lasting change through creative thinking and art. And this is a project we're really excited to have worked on for the last 5 years, called Peckham Palms. And Cyndi is one of the directors of Peckham Palms, and was there right at the very start with us. And she's going to talk about the next section now.
It's always good to take off the mute when you're about to start. Hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and actually I was quite interested in listening to everyone else, because we're so busy we don't always get to listen to as much of what we're cross collaborating with. So yeah, it's amazing. I didn't know one of the projects that Paul did there. One of the things straight away that I think will be slightly different with the Peckham Palms project is that whereas a lot of the projects of Something and Sons has been about recreating a legacy and building on, creating something from nothing to involve the community, Peckham Palms is basically a project where we're trying to maintain the existing legacy of a community. So Peckham, if anybody knows it, has a high population of Black, Caribbean and African people, and has done for largely over 30 to 40 years. On Peckham Rye Lane, it's a smorgasbord of colour and noise, very similar to Brixton in many respects. And one of its most mainstay sort of popularities amongst food, African and Caribbean foodstuffs is hairdressers. If you've ever been down there, you'll see a number of barber shops, and you'll actually even see some women calling out and asking if you want your hair done, and etc. etc. So one of the biggest issues affecting more marginalised communities has been gentrification, and Southwark Council, in their wisdom, probably after a lot of things have been talked about with gentrification, they saw that this particular street that we can see, called Blenheim Grove, that was home to about 5 or 6 shops that had a chair rental model, which is where a hairstylist would actually rent a chair rather than a hairdresser's. Would be able to start a very small business, but a very busy and thriving one. And the council understood that there would be a need for these people to be relocated when a certain level of regeneration was going to occur. And as I mentioned gentrification, but I'll be kinder and say regeneration. The key issue is that Peckham Rice Station is currently undergoing regeneration. It needs it. But we all know that when something gets fixed up, then the commercial properties surrounding that will eventually start to get more expensive. And that sort of laid into the Blenheim Grove scenario, which meant that ultimately those shops where the stylists who are chair renting would probably not be able to A, afford to be there, and B, the actual people that run those shops would be probably thinking to triple rents. So it's complex, it's political. So I think that this project is really based on social activism and trying to keep a certain economy moving within a particular community. So Something and Sons tendered for the opportunity to recreate the very same model of Blenheim Grove, and Peckham Palms was born. I was brought into the project in 2015, and we built an entire space with 12 units. We did some amazing, from an arts point of view, Something and Sons did an amazing point. They brought in these wonderful facades, which were really thought about with the kind of bright and vibrant nature of the African and Caribbean community. If you see there's a bust of one of the many women that we were working with intensely. There's a lady called Monique Tomlinson, another director, who spent, good grief, probably 2 years intensely kind of encouraging these women to trust and buy into what we were trying to do, and with the local community within the actual vicinity of where we built. So it was a lot of work to kind of get it off the ground. In 2019, we launched, this was the launch that you've just kindly put forward. It was amazing. I think one of the key reasons why we've had so much support over the project is it does feel like one of the very few projects in Southwark and in Lambeth that was about genuine regeneration to a lot of people. This is just an opinion, because it was absolutely about having a Black-led businesses operating and continuing what they've been doing before, but bringing it up to another level and creating a centralized hub for the community. So not only do we have units that we recreated like on Blenheim Grove, we've also had an event space that has had a number of artists. This is Shingi from the Noisettes, who came and launched our event. I don't know if anybody watches Loose Women on ITV, but we had one of the panelists, Judy Love, when she was first up and coming, come and also perform. Over the sort of 2 years, we've had a number of events, from arts events to pay-as-you-go yoga, food collaborations, drinks brands getting involved with the place, and we've just been trying to keep this vibrancy of the area and the community alive. So it's a very different type of project in terms of what Paul was mentioning, but I think it's a really important one, because in terms of, like, you know, keeping that discipline of community, we've been able to achieve that. So yeah, I'm very glad to be here, and if anyone has any questions regarding this, they should feel welcome. Paul, I'll bring it back to you, unless you want to ask me anything regarding the project.
Not at all. No, thank you, Cyndi. That's really really fantastic. I mean, I think we'll come to it later, but I think one of, you know, Cyndi and I have been working together for 5, almost 6 years now, possibly. And I think, you know, like Ben talks about it, I think collaboration is kind of very much at the heart of all of our processes, and about opening up projects for other people to lead, and for other people to kind of do the bits that we can never do. And I think that's kind of been a really key kind of learning that we've had over the years. I'm now going to pass on to Ursula to talk about the fossil, and this is a project that I've personally not been as closely involved in. My colleague Andy has been leading it, but it's certainly, you know, it's the start of creating another stage, another place, which will be occupied, we hope, by more people we meet. You know, people who will join us on this journey. And once this has happened, you know, once Ursula's kind of summarised what's going on there, then we will open it up to a conversation and really start to get into the nitty gritty of how we work and how we think it's best to create places which come to life once we've left.
Hiya. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Apologies for that. Oh, so can you? Yeah, great.
Is that okay? Hi. So hi everybody. I'm Ursula White, and I'm the engagement producer for Future Fossil, along with my colleague Moriam Grillo, who is behind the scenes currently doing the webinar. We work very closely together, which is great, and we've been working over the last year. At the moment, that picture that you can see is Oxley Park, and at the moment there's nothing there except the green grass and the trees, and but soon in the summer there will be the installation of Future Fossil, and Future Fossil is obviously the idea of something in the sun, and it's an artwork which has been created in collaboration with the community, and it's those ideas of playing with form and with materials. Andy Merritt he's really been interested in plastiglomerates, which are plastic objects which have become embedded into the fabric of stones, and they've become a different sort of object, and he's really interested in playing with that idea. So what Future Fossil will be a fossil of a house, which is a typical Oxley Park house, and it will be as if in 10,000 years that house has been dug up, and this is what the people or the animals, perhaps it's just the animals, or it's some other, or the insects that have rediscovered this fossil, because nobody knows what's going to happen in 10,000 years time. But this is the idea that we're launched 10,000 years into the future, and this is what has been created. So what you'll see is that what Andy's proposed is a space where people can play, essentially, can gather informally, but also you'll see that there's a stage. So whereas some of the other projects that have been talked about so far have been about kind of informality, in a sense of just coming and seeing, you know, and those interactions happening. This space we've been playing with is, I guess the question we asked was, how can we help create patterns of formal and informal activity at the fossil? Because we see that the stage is like a theatre, a special place where people can come to at special times. And when we initially talked to Andy, we imagined this place a little bit like the Stonehenge of the future. And so I guess we thought our job was about activating this space. How could we activate this very special place and make some special times at certain times of the year? And then also, how can we make everyday things happen? How can we encourage people to use this space? So that's what we've been doing over the last year, and there's nothing there at the moment, so we're having to invoke people's imaginations and get people thinking really about the project. So this is the rear of the sculpture, and you'll see, so what I was showing you before was the front of the sculpture, and that's the sort of more the human facing, if you like, part of the sculpture. And this is where Andy has really inviting not just humans to come and gather, but to come and to invite insects and birds and wildlife and plants of all kinds to come and live at the fossil. And so we started quite simply with walk and talk events. I mean, we've obviously been living in, our job started at the beginning of lockdown, so we've had to be quite inventive, but when we were able to meet, we started with some simple walk and talk events, and one of the ones we did initially was to collect seeds with the community, and these are seeds from the local area, which is a very special area. It's built on, Oxley Park is built on built on ancient agricultural and meadow land. So we wanted to make sure that when the fossil is installed, that we're able to bring the community back together and to spread these seeds. We've also been doing some talks, these talks that you're part of now. This is also part of our programme, and that's because Fossil isn't just about a local community, it's about a sort of network across national and international communities connected with those ideas around climate change and the climate emergency. So we've been working with schools recently, and we've just started a project called the Anthropocene Time Capsule Project. And this is the idea that we want our very smallest children to start thinking about the objects that they own, the things that they discard, and the things that are littered in the environment, and to collect those things for us. And so we're collecting whole, and they've been given seed packets, and they will be, we will collect those tomorrow actually, and those are going to be part of the sculpture, which is really lovely. So we hope to show, take a little video and show that to the school and invite those children to come. We're also working on projects towards the opening ceremony of Future Fossil. And there's a number of projects. This project is about thinking about how you create a special moment for the opening ceremony. So we've been working on a spoken word project with an associate artist called Kat Anderson. And with this group is a group that's based at Milton Keynes Gallery, and they're called Art Riot. And so they've been working with a potter and ceramicist, and also with our poet at the same time. So they got to play. Crucially, it was all about sort of trying to make those words concrete, really, I guess is what we were sort of playing with there. So they've come up with the start of a poem, and we're going to create a collective community poem with other school groups. We're also working on a giant picnic blanket, and that's going to be made with associate artists Mary Hearn and Jane Charles, and with two schools, including the local school Oxley Park Academy, and there'll be 700 people involved in that project, which is quite astounding, really. And the idea is that when we can come together again and we can open the fossil, that we will have a special moment of unraveling the picnic blanket. Crucially, and what many have said about the way Something in the Sun work, is it's about what is left behind. How can, when Moriam and I leave, and I hope we always continue to have a connection in some way, but when we do leave, we will have left a number of permanent or semi-permanent things in place. And those can be anything from networks of people connected to the fossil, people who will come and use the fossil at various times of the year, and also to sort of stimulate that and to activate the fossil. We wanted to put sort of young people and children at the centre of that. And so we've created a future producers competition, which is intended to kind of get young people thinking about what they would like to happen there. And this space will be a ready-made space where anybody can come and hold a concert, for example, run a market. And I think Andy describes it a bit like a buttercross, a marketplace idea where people are gathering formally. But also there may be at certain times of the year, there may be special events. So we've got this competition running currently, and the idea is that we will announce the winners of the competition at the opening ceremony of Future Fossil. So I hope you'll all come to that. And that's me. The only other thing to say is that I guess what we're hoping to, I think it's Andy's dream and it's our dream, is that we will create a Friends of the Fossil group who will essentially safeguard the fossil and become guardians of the fossil in the future. So that's me.
Ursula, thank you very much. That's really, really interesting. And I'd just like to remind the audience that please do post questions to us. We really want to hear from you, and there's some great people here to kind of have their brains picked. So please do send questions through. I'm going to sort of, I guess, start off a conversation firstly by sort of asking, saying thank you to you all for sharing things. I guess what I would like to ask you probably, Ben, is you talked about five years you've been doing this and working with people, and I just thought, wow, that's incredible to be sustaining that for such a long time. Now, what would you know? How do you do that? How do you create that trust, those relationships that sustain for such a long time? And is it important to you, and to you too, Cyndi, that these things do last? Why? So I'd love to hear you sort of speak to those 2 points.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, I think we all agree that there's no magic recipe for things and how they develop in time. When we start this kind of project, we hope that something is gonna take off. It's not just our imagination, but it's also other people gonna kind of be interested and then engage, but eventually also be like have a share of that idea. When I started El Warsha in Tunis in 2016, it was a 3-month residency. I had no idea that would carry on, but it was really, I mean, this kind of thing where you see a reaction and it starts to be a dialogue with the environment. And I felt like there was potential for a future for this project in this space and in this environment. And it's actually not often the case. Actually, you start a lot of projects, and I feel like a lot of the time I've started projects in London or another location where actually people are tired. People have seen a lot of artists coming around and trying to do something. And it's like, wow, another one of those, and what's going to happen, and sometimes there's this question: what are we catering for? What is our role in an environment where there's needs beyond obviously what we as artists sometimes produce, which can seem a bit kind of feeble, and especially, I mean, looking at, for example, at Tottenham, where we work with elderly people, it's obviously they're happy to have this conversation, this presence, and those relationships. But you discover over time working in this environment with institutions as well, with the council, that there's a lot more going on, and yeah, it's finding your role in that environment. In terms of how do you sustain it, I guess it's really about finding the few individuals who have like this will to get on board, and most of the time it's a few crazy people who like get on with it and take on the idea, and I mean, it's incredible to see your projects. A lot of them I didn't know. I'm amazed to see how you've managed, and maybe you can tell us more about it, but it seems that you make space for other people, and you have this ability to retrieve, to leave that space for people to develop something, which is not often the case with artists, where we take the space and we are on stage, and we take basically we suck some of the air out for other people. And I think maybe I'm interested to know, Paul, how you feel like staying in the background sometime and not taking the forefront, so that something else happens, not just your vision, but also
but I think there's definitely similarities in the way we're working. And I was really struck by when you said someone came up to you and said, I want to build a boat. Now, for me, I think the way we work is when someone says, I want to build a boat, where as many times as possible you say, okay, let's do it. Now, that's hard sometimes, and it's really hard. And the bigger the project and the budgets and the more weight there is on something, sometimes you lose that lightness. But I remember our first project where we took over an empty shop in Hackney and built it was called Farm Shop. We built a farm in a shop. So we literally just put a poster out and said, who wants to come, and how much food can we grow in a shop? And we plastered an area in Hackney with that poster, and we put it online on Gumtree. And then literally 50 people just showed up on a Saturday and were like, oh yeah, how much food can we grow in a shop? And that was all we had. We had like this empty shop and a bag of seeds. But then the act was to get out of the way. So if someone says, oh, let's try this, it'd be like, okay, let's try that. And little experiments were popping off all over the building. And I think that with what I'm seeing with your work is that I imagine, like we have to, when people make suggestions, you need to be in a mindset of listening. But it's like you said, it's really, really hard, because you've also got your objectives as artists. You've got commissioners on your back telling you they want to achieve certain things and not other things. You've got money and budgets and all the other stuff that makes that lightness sometimes feel quite heavy, and means that sometimes you can't get away until something's got its legacy. Because I imagine, Ben, if you'd left at certain times in the project, you would have actually found that there weren't those individuals who were strong enough to carry it with their own vision, and the timing of when you leave is kind of critical. And it also, I've experienced overstaying things too. It's sometimes you love it too. You love being there too. It is a reflection on your own self-image in many ways, and what you've hoped to achieve. And it's an ongoing process of learning and growing. And Cyndi, I haven't fully left Peckham Palms yet. I can't wait for the day. But what do you think, Cyndi?
I think it ties nicely what Ben said about you're both talking about people that can be involved, and I don't know how long I'm going to be there for, but I in the meantime I feel like I'm going to be there for a fairly long time. We've got like a 25-year SLA, an agreement that we're signed up to, and I would like to think that I'll be there for a fairly long time. I think what Something and Sons, to their credit, is that they seem to have this ability to kind of let go, which personally I'm even quite surprised about. I mean, Paul, bless him, Paul and Andy, actually, when Andy was more on the project, you're talking about a business hub that is primarily led by Black women, and specifically for Black Afro hair and beauty, which in itself is a niche in terms of the white community, let's be honest. And these poor guys, they have had to deal with, like, initially 4 strong, Black women giving these guys a lot of grief. But what I can, say about them both is that they've just been very much in listening mode, which has been brilliant. And it's what is actually needed. You talk about the bigger, wider discussions of Black Lives Mattering. These guys were doing this way before it was cool to put a black square on there. And I'm not here to champion that, but it has to be said. I'm never going to tell him that again. So I'm glad it's recorded. That's the only time I'm going to tell him that. I think what is best to do is to get people from the community. I mean, my own background is that I basically have been in South London practically all of my life. My mother had a foodstuff shop very similar to the ones in Peckham all my life. I know Brixton intrinsically and also Peckham. And the team that have come together that Something and Son identified are literally from the locality. And I think that's what is so important. I don't often see that with arts collectives, just like what you kind of alluded to in your conversation. Everyone says it, oh, you know, we need to pass the mic, we need to pass the baton, but we don't really see it in action. I'm really proud to work on the project because I feel that more often than not, the baton has been passed to us, and you know, we're even in currently now we're about to go to the next level of majority ownership for you know for Black women as a business, and that's amazing, given that that's a very difficult thing to achieve in a place like London, where rampant capitalism is what it's all about. So I don't know, like for me, I'm more on the grassroots level of this project in that respect. I'm not coming from the art side as much, but the arts and the creativity of how we've managed to get this far is really important. But also the social activism and the actual redirection for the greater good is an important part of arts practice, I would like to think. So in that way, I think we're delivering that.
And Cyndi, you've played down your many other hats in terms of kind of, you know, being a convener of people around music and kind of again taking over and occupying spaces in London for a program. How do you do it? How do you like to be collaborated with, and how do you collaborate with other people?
So for the last 20 years, my husband have been like an events culture producer. So I put on events for Brixton Village, have done for about 2.5 years, where we put 3 to 4 live events, whether they be DJs or musicians. We put on a lot of street activations. We've worked in South Bank, we've worked in, I know, for Wayne Hemingway's festival, wherever, however. The interesting thing, though, is that it's come out of a level of frustration of feeling rather marginalised. You know, I'll be straight with my politics. I don't think that we've had the advantage of, you know, Arts Council funding or whatever funding. We've actually had to be quite self-starting. And I think that's probably why you and I got on from the off, because, you know, you wanted sort of like, you know, perhaps people with the self-starting mindset. But yeah, it's really interesting because initially when we first started to go it alone, and we felt that the doors we were knocking were not really reciprocal, it was coming from sheer frustration. But you know, you kind of walk and chew gum, you're frustrated, but you're trying to create your own space. Right now it's very cool to be that person, to be those people as we speak. But so again, I wouldn't like to, yeah, I'm trying to be deadly honest with the audience rather than really cool on the panel and say that, you know, sometimes, you know, you, as Maya Angelou would have said, you know, you use your anger and your, you know, and you use it in a constructive manner. You don't get bitter about it. And I think more and more people, and more young people across the board, are starting to recognise that, you know, they don't need the existing system to cultivate and create. And that's the culture I come from anyway. So yeah, I'm not sure that it directly responds to you, but I think it's what I want to say to you with regards to your question.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting as well that we're all using slightly different tools, in that, you know, the tool of music and performance to bring people together. But Ben, I was also struck by your you know, what your furniture building. Why are you bringing people? Why are you using building as a way to bring people together? And what do you feel like those tools that, you know, almost it seems to me, looking at your work, like people are doing one thing, but the outcome is always something different. So they might be building furniture together, but there's a different outcome. And it reminds me a little bit. So people say you have the best conversations when you're washing up, almost because your hands are busy. And have you experienced, you know, what sort of moments have you experienced with people through this process? And have you made friends? And, you know, how's it work?
I mean, it's funny in when I started as part of the project, we had those meetings where we'd sometimes sit around the table, and in Tunisia and Hafsaya, a few of the young people we were working with said, they have an expression when you're sitting around and discussing like seriously a project, and it was like, oh, you're not working, you're doing what they called in French the association. So you're like getting together and then you're talking as if you are going to do something, but you're not going to do it, and it's just blabbering, you know, and it's not considered work, you know, having an idea and discussing it. But when you start having tools in hand, and when you start making something, suddenly it starts to be real, it starts to be serious. So it starts to be kind of I mean, constructive in a different way. And yeah, I often felt in the previous project I've done, which were about public space and building things, and that there was a lot about talking about that space, about that thing, but I always wanted to be more in the production of it as a collective kind of effort. And I mean, I'm not trained as a carpenter. I'm not. I don't have this kind of background. So there's also this thing where, I mean, you're around this project, you don't know how you're going to do it, and I think it puts people on the same kind of ground. You're like, you have to find a solution together. And I mean, that's what I like. You have a challenge and it's tangible, it's there, and that's what kind of also sustain a certain energy within the team and within the project.
And do you find similarities between, you know, if you're working with people who might be separated by 70 years of life, like, you know, an 8-year-old and a 78-year-old, and they're both making something, and some of the furniture you showed almost look like the same pieces, but with completely different people. How do you navigate that? How do you kind of work with people from such a broad, you know, a broad range of life experiences, but essentially doing some of the same things?
I mean, the reality is quite different, and those with the different, like people in Tottenham, or with people in Tunis, or with the different age group. And it's quite interesting, actually. You realize doing those things that the aspiration, obviously, are not the same. The energy is not the same at all. I mean, we're in a kind of environment where, like, elderly people or really young people are not necessarily considered like citizen as such, like, or they have a different status. In London, if it wasn't for this project, I don't think I would have hung out with elderly people over 70 or over 80. And obviously for them, there was maybe not the same excitement about creating something or making a piece of furniture, but there was this idea, this excitement, I think, of being together and of changing their environment. I feel there is a kind of generational, sorry for the not generational, but yeah, generational gap. For me, for example, when they were complaining about their living room, the fact that the curtains hasn't been changed for 30 years, or I was like, well, let's do it. You know, we're here, we've got the machines. And I think for them, it was a lot about, well, you know, the council should really do that. And I think there was this kind of conflict as well, like who is supposed to do that? Why can't we try to do it, you know? And I think that's also part of the conversation. And then with different age group, you have those different conversation of why things matter, you know, and what matters, and who is in charge, who is responsible. I mean, I've learned a lot from being in these different contexts. And I don't think I've got a kind of solution, but it's really, yeah, from an anthropological point of view, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I also sort of see in your work, and I think with the fossil and with the palms, we're also kind of wrestling with who has the right to decide the spaces that, you know, citizens collaborate in and come together in. And I think you've nailed it there, of like lots of people. You know, we don't really have a positive culture of people taking over spaces in cities or in their local environment and just hanging out and talking. You know, we're very, I think, trained into the formalities of you know, go and spend money somewhere to socialize, or you know, get permission. And we almost, the idea of gathering, and I think it's something that comes up in the fossil because its location, is the idea of, say, some young people gathering at the fossil. Whoa, don't do that. Young people shouldn't gather. Or, you know, and maybe COVID's changed that a bit because we've had to find different forms of spaces. I mean, you've got people having birthday parties in parks with a light rain, which is something that would never have happened before. but yeah, I think that we're talking a lot about, you know, community and spaces and stages that people come together in, but maybe there's a lot we've forgotten, which I think some of your work, Ben, sort of brings back to us, that in other cultures and other countries, people do gather around a bunch of stones and sit on them and have a chat. And
this is exactly what the community is like. You know, unfortunately for the Black community, we're at constant loggerheads in this country about communing. We're constantly being broken up. We got a complete inverse issue, because there's a loggerheads of misunderstanding of what communing together means. You know, Notting Hill Carnival is a perfect example of what happens when you let people just come together. And yeah, there's got to be structure and all that, but it's really different what you're saying. I'm listening and go, well, we don't have that problem. Like, even as an events promoter, which definitely like lends itself to Black culture and music and art, you know, we put a sound system out, we put some quality furnitures or space out, and we let the sort of the notes in between, the magic happen, the vibe. You know, I think Ben mentioned the word similar. It's just a vibe. But you can't do that when you're going to the Arts Council, or you're going to a sort of, you know, rather stuffy, you know, very antiquated arts organisation that wants everything listed out of how the community will come together. So it becomes very rigid. And come on, you know, some of the best parties and some of the best gatherings, you know, you could never, if you really thought about why that gathering you know had at the pub last night really worked, there are these other elements that I don't think always get identified in, you know, the arts community. But I understand why, because if you're getting paid to do it, you kind of have to deliver some variables. You can't just say, oh, let's rock up and throw this communal gathering. You have to prove that it's going to work, but in a way that can also stifle much of what you're trying to achieve. It's very interesting. I don't know. You guys are more from that school. What do you think?
I mean, Cyndi, if I can.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, it's okay.
Go for it. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, I guess our context is slightly different, and Milton Keynes, and I didn't really say enough about Milton Keynes at the start, but Milton Keynes is, for those who don't know, still what is a fairly young city. It's only 50 years old. It was like purely agricultural land, and then and now we have you know, coming up to sort of 300,000 people living in the city, which has a network of roads. So it's a very sort of different location, but it's always had this kind of relationship with trying to create a new culture, and that's been really, really interesting. I mean, I've lived here since 1974, so I've kind of seen those things like mud piles, and then, you know, and of course when we were children we would create our own kind of special places and special things that happened. And then there's also been people who've brought in amazing art things that have stimulated and created. So I think both things are possible, and I guess that's kind of what Fossil is doing, is playing with both of those ideas. And we are outside as well, so we have very little control over the environment in a sense. So yes, I think we're really hopeful that people will just rock up, and I guess the work that Moriam and I are doing is to sort of encourage and make people to sort of lay those pathways into the city. And there's the people who sort of planned the city were quite sort of hippie, and they, you know, they had this idea that things were laid out on ley lines, you know. So we've been kind of playing with that idea that we can sort of connect people into that sort of deeper history, really, pre-Milton Keynes, and get people thinking about the sort of the things that, you know, and the animals that were there, and exactly because Fossil is very much about thinking about humans not being separate from but being part of. And that's really what, you know, every time I think about Fossil, I now think, oh, you know, how can we encourage the insects to come, you know, what is it we're going to do today, you know, and I guess that's yeah, That's what we've been doing, is both those things, but it's slightly different, I guess, than each of your projects and each of the things that you're doing, and it's really, really fascinating. I mean, I've come from sort of that background of being entrepreneurial, so I've sort of done that in my own work before, and that is possible, but it's very difficult actually in Milton Keynes, because it's very young. So the sheer numbers of people are like-minded spirits, if you like, are lower and in density in the city, and I guess that's so what we're trying to do, I guess, is to encourage more like-minded spirits at Future Fossil, and with that Future Producers competition is to say to young people, hold on a minute, you know, this is like your chance, come on, you can do anything you like here, give it a go. And I've had people ringing me up going, so what is it that I have to do? And I have to say to them, what is it you want to do? You know, what is it? Tell us what it is you want to do. And that's all you've got to do. Tell us what you want to do and sell it to us.
I'm going to
make it happen.
I'm going to move to Milton Keynes, because sometimes London is so densely, you know, we're saturated with so much brilliance that often we're getting, you know, local governments all over London. I think, you know, Paul and Ben will agree, always sort of saying, no, we can't do any more, you know, where you're saying the complete opposite. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very different, but it's really interesting, and what's really wonderful is that there's a real maverick spirit, so you can get some crazy stuff happen. We've got like dinosaurs in the landscape, and we've got you know, people have done amazing projects in schools, which, you know, essentially taking over the whole school. You know, there's been some fantastic history of people going, this is what needs to happen here. What do we do to address this kind of, you know, all these people have come from all over the world. You know, we have multiple different languages and cultures in Milton Keynes, so we're all migrants in that way. And but in a sense, that sort of destabilizing thing of not having a culture. So those artists have been really important in kind of consolidating things, you know, and giving people a focus and giving times of the year that are special. All of those things that art, you know, does, you know, helps to sort of bring you together and connect you. And that's really what Future Fossil, I hope, will be.
I mean, it's a fascinating context, I think, as a new settlement that you have in Milton Keynes of how do you create those shared histories that become, you know, which in places like London are just through the mass of people are quite deep. I'm going to pick Cyndi up on saying that London is overrun with excellence, I think she said, which I think, you know, that you may spend more time outside the city.
Excellent. I didn't. It's just overrun. It's just overrun.
Okay.
Saturated with a lot of creative energy. And so, you know, there's so many ideas being placed on it. That's what I mean. I'm not doing that.
I'm just teasing you, don't worry.
But I think Ursula's really, you rebutted beautifully, and you really have, because I remember I'm a child of 74, and I remember Milton Keynes as I grew up. And I love the idea that, I hadn't even thought of it that way, that everybody is a very new migrant in Milton Keynes. That's fascinating. Brilliant. Sorry, Paul, over to you.
Not at all, no. And also, what would be interesting to know about having been to Milton Keynes and that it seems to me like many people are blessed with private space. You know, some houses are bigger, there's gardens that people must gather in and have incredible parties in. What role do you think public spaces play for people to gather? Because one of the things I observe in London is that, you know, when you live in I live in a small flat and haven't got a garden, you're out in the parks, you're out in the pubs, because often you're not blessed with those private spaces to invite other people to. What's it like there, and what role do you think public space can play in creating places to collaborate?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think that is one of the things around it. I mean, if you come to Milton Keynes, some people say, where are the people here? Because when you drive, and people do drive through, there's a network. It's like laid out on an American grid system, and you drive through, and the trees have grown up around these estates, which are a kilometre square. So the estates are essentially small villages in themselves, and that is, and it would, I think, designed to function so that you create smaller communities within a larger community. And Milton Keynes is very spread out as well. So you've got that sort of sense of, are you part of your estate community, or are you part of a city community? So all those kind of ideas of identity, I guess, have developed over time. And I think Milton Keynes has got a sort of more of an identity, certainly, I guess, in the last 10 years, and partly due to various sort of cultural things, I think, you know, partly we have a festival, international festival here, we have all those things help to sort of consolidate what is it that we are about. But yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really certainly, yeah, for me it's really interesting to hear more about the place, and you know.
Yeah, but people do have pride. It is more, I guess, that people are in their homes more, I think, and not in the same way as London, where you know, people have to go to a park in order to have some access. There is more garden space here, and there is that, and that can breed kind of isolation, and actually, you know, strangely, you know, because there isn't a necessity to make contact with people. So our task in a way is to sort of ask people to sort of turn around and see the light, really see what it is that they're missing, you know, in life. Because I think you can have everything, can't you? You can have your TV, you can have, you know, you can stay in your own living room and have everything, but you know, there's something that I guess can be missing, sort of spiritually, or whatever, you know, you want to say. But it's that sort of stuff that Milton Keynes, I feel, as second generation, needs, is very, very much so, you know, it's that need for kind of connection with people.
Great stuff. Now, I'm audience, there's been no questions from you yet, so if you've got 30 seconds just to throw some in before we draw to a close. But I wanted to talk, you know, Ben, I think you were very honest when you were talking earlier, and you said, you know, you don't always get that energy from a group when you're working with them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think I'd also share that experience. You don't always find the people who pick up the baton and make a project their own. I'd like to reflect. I think artists are often quite bad at doing this. Of like, I don't get involved in. If an artist approached me and said, "Do you want to get involved in an art project and come and spend your Saturday afternoon doing stuff?" I'm not the type of person that would, and I think a lot of people aren't actually. You know, I think sometimes it feels like really, really hard to engage people, and I guess it's interesting to maybe ask the question of like, where have you failed? So what makes things, you know, when we've done things that haven't worked, why do we think that is? And also, what is it about those people? Maybe some of them are listening today. What is it about those people who have the energy to help our work come to life? Because without it, you know, I'd be stuck on my own running a black hairdressing arcade in Peckham, and you'd have made about 20 chairs on your own by now with no mates around you. So I feel like across all of our work, it's not actually the artists that do most of the lifting. It's the people who trust us and the people who support us. And is there anything maybe all of us could say about, you know, what does it take a person to actually come into and sometimes someone else's idea and then make it better? What is it about them? Who wants to jump? Great.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, I just think there's some amazing people who do exactly that, who just will take risks. I'm thinking of, we have a local arts centre next to us, near Future Fossil, literally a walking distance from there, and it's an old farmhouse, and it's a series of artist studios, and they're just endlessly supportive of the project and endlessly saying yes to doing things, and that's really, really wonderful. And amazingly, that happens far more than people saying no, I find. Actually, you know, if you have a conversation with people Sometimes you have to, I mean, at the moment we've had to be incredibly persistent, and we've had to go back again and again, especially to schools, because, you know, schools have been under a tremendous pressure. But it's paying off. You know, we're now, you know, having 700 people make a picnic blanket, which I was still going, oh my God, this is massive. But yeah, that is a pretty amazing thing, you know, to do that, and just being persistent, I think, and just really having that integrity in what you believe in the project, and saying, you know, come on. I think
stuff.
people love it.
Great. Ben, what do you think? Yeah, Cyndi, what do you think? Yeah.
Ben's like lovely, silent, that he speaks beautifully. I'm going to let him talk because he hasn't, and he's got always something nice to say. But I think for me, I think it's, look, when I think about our work, I met you late at night when you first approached me with some council meeting, and we have worked all the hours, haven't we? And we've been to so many situations, and I'm sure that Ursula and Ben will say the same thing. To be connected with humans, you can't be doing this 9 to 5 and say that you're part of the community. You know, it takes a lot of communing. You know, there's a lot of unpaid hours in all of this to collaborate and get to know the people that you're saying, hey, I'm bringing this thing to you and I want you guys to be involved. And if you don't have that time, you know, that's you cancelling, you know, a night with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whoever, and saying, actually, I've got to go down the road to see these guys because I promised that I would speak to them, because you want to create a trust, because you believe in it. So that's genuinely, if you're going to say you're going to be part of some community project, you have to really ask yourself, are you really there? Are you going to be there on a Sunday? You know, are you going to be that person that talks about how you've only got this amount of hours to work on this? If you're that person, I would say don't do it. Just don't do it, because you will be on call 24/7 for at least, in our situation, at least 2-3 years of the inception of it. At the very least, you have to be on call. That was all I wanted to say.
Love that. And Ben, do you want to? I'll summarize at the end, but I love you. What do you think?
I mean, you were mentioning me alone building chairs, and I have to say I've been doing that as well. I guess there's this question, like, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one to hear it, does it make a sound? And quite often that's what we do. We are in the middle of nowhere, and there's no one to listen. But I guess there is this thing, like keeping at it, and as Cyndi said, like, I mean, it's you put yourself in a situation where you want to wake up and you want to do that, and I guess that's the energy that you bring that somehow will ripple into kind of creating something, and there's no kind of, I mean, yeah, that's what I would say, really.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'd just like to say, you know, I think thank you everyone in the audience.
Paul, can I just interrupt? I do apologise.
Absolutely, mate.
We had an anonymous attendee that just sent in this wonderful message that I think you'd like. So thank you for this evening. I think the work you do helps remind people of the communities they are actually in and what's good about it, which is hard to remember sometimes when you're just trying to pay the bills. So whoever said that, I think thank you, because yes, 100%. That's what
100%. I think that's often also, you know, I think us as creative people working in communities, we always have to remember to respect people's time as well. I think that's another thing, is that whilst we might be able to do this as a job, other people are getting on with things. And I think it's same in my own life, is that if someone taps me on the shoulder, will you do an art project today? 99% of the time I say, bugger off, I've got something else to do. And that's got to be okay as well, I think. I just want to kind of summarize. We've been from Tottenham to Tunisia, and then to Oxley Park in Milton Keynes via Peckham. And I think, you know, just to summarize what you all said, is that when we try and bring people together, we need to create real time to have real connections. And that needs to be, you know, off the book, so to speak. So drinking, chatting, going through struggles together. And I guess in the end, sort of forming bonds and friendships. As Ben said, you've got to keep at it. And if you do, you might create a ripple that someone else can kind of surf or pick up to help the project grow. But of all the things I think that make a project happen and create the conditions in which community can take place, I think, is to say yes more. I think, you know, institutions, in your work, when someone comes and asks you if you can build a boat, if we say yes, then we create the chance to come together. And I think it's a world of saying no that has sometimes created the chasms between us. And it's, I believe, for us as citizens to pick up the baton and to actually say yes to one another, and ignore the authority sometimes. Create those places.
I feel like Paul's saying some cryptic message to me, because he messaged me today and asked me about an idea, and I said no. So
no,
I'll say.
Cyndi, I wouldn't. Guys, thank you so much for a really, I think, entertaining and enlightening conversation. It's been great to learn more about your different work, and mostly to thank the audience who may have already left, because I can't really see who is on here, for listening, and just to leave a kind of final action, which I think is really important when there's a talk like this, is please get in touch with Ursula. Please become a friend of the Fossil. And whether you're doing it with, you know, whether you're doing it with a bunch of mates out of sight, sitting there and having a drink underneath the sculpture in 5 years' time, or if you're taking part in the formal program, we just want it to be a place that you occupy and you create a new history and a new legacy there. So good night, everyone, and thank you, Ben, Ursula, Cyndi, for your time and wisdom, and everyone, go and have a glass of wine and enjoy the evening.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.